Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's video, we're talking about competition in the AI sector, including how some smaller players are giving the giants a run for their money. We'll take a look at agentic AI, and we'll discuss key trends in generative AI in the enterprise. To talk about that, I'm joined by David Linthicum, one of the tech industry's foremost experts in cloud and artificial intelligence. Dave, absolutely thrilled to have you with us today.
Oh, it's great to be here, James. It's good to see you.
So I want to ask a question about your recent podcast, but first, where can people find your podcast? What's the name of it?
Cloud Computing Insider. I have a couple actually. Cloud Computing Insider. It's out on YouTube.
Okay.
Just search on Cloud Computing Insider. You can find it there. I also have AI Insights Innovation, which is actually a Cube property. Posts there once a week as well.
Mhm.
Find me out on LinkedIn and got a Substack and also a blog on InfoWorld. So I'm trying to get my name out everywhere.
Fantastic. All right, so it was a recent podcast I thought was really interesting. You said that the big cloud AI players, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, cannot match the nimbleness of some of the smaller second tier players like Weave, Snowflake, Oracle, in terms of serving the AI workloads of their clients. And you added that this trend towards smaller players is not a fleeting phenomenon; it's a fundamental restructuring of the industry. Okay, so that I see that it's clearly a contrarian take. I mean, those big players are seen as the go-to platforms. I think Amazon puts out a new tool every 11 minutes. Microsoft supports open AI, for goodness sake. So how do you see the big three cloud players falling short in terms of AI workloads?
Yeah, and actually, I made this prediction last year just to take a victory lap, and took a lot of grief for it, where I talked about how they're failing at AI, and I just saw it bespoke in the industry as people were going through and trying to select the platforms that were right for their AI platforms. Often it wasn't the public cloud providers. Obviously, public cloud providers have the easy button for AI because they have, you just hit the nail on the head. AWS puts out a service. I'm sure they'll put out 5 services by the time we're done with the show.
Right.
And so you would think they would have kind of a lock on that industry, people who are looking for AI systems, but the enterprises are finding a couple of things. They need to maintain control of the information. They have compliance issues that they're dealing with. They're not quite ready to trust the big public cloud providers to make that happen. But the big thing is cost. You work the cost analytics up for these things. Some of these AI systems, you have massive amounts of GPUs that you need for this stuff. It's going to be $10,000 a day that enterprises are going to have to pay to run this, and they're running the numbers. And I'm working with a few of them as well as a consultant, and the numbers just aren't working out. It's too expensive. So I kind of, and also they didn't view the scalability. And also, if you look at the core features and functions of some of the big cloud platforms, big cloud providers, they're not really optimized for AI workloads. They're optimized for their own stuff. They're optimized for typical applications, but they haven't optimized for the way that AI uses storage and processors and things like that. Everything's very tightly coupled. They work in a very kind of distributed, intra-cloud distributed fashion. And so enterprises, more often than not, are making choices in other places. I don't think that means the public cloud providers are going to go down. I just think,
Right.
like we saw last quarter, they're going to miss expectations in terms of their growth numbers until they kind of reevaluate where the market's going and make some fundamental shifts in the services they offer. But in the meantime, private cloud providers are benefiting. Cloud's growing like crazy, but it's growing more in terms of momentum with the private cloud providers, what I call the microclouds, the core weaves. Managed service providers are actually starting to do really well as well as colo providers. All the cloud alternatives, even Oracle, by the way, all the cloud alternatives are not the big three. I think people are looking to focus there.
I remember in the early days of cloud or past the very first days, there was sort of a race to the bottom in terms of cost because they each wanted to grab market share in these really important days. So the fact that they're pricey now for AI workloads suggests they haven't started to play that game yet in the AI era, if I'm understanding you correctly.
No, you got it right. And there was a race to the bottom in the early days of cloud. You got to remember that was 2008 to 2013 when that
Right.
whole airline, price war kind of took off. And I,
Yep.
I think what happened now is they got 15 years into it. They have built many billions of dollars of infrastructure that they made, and they can't afford to take a loss on the infrastructure like some of the startups can. So they're putting a price point out there that they view as fair and probably as something the market will accept. And it's just way more expensive than some of the other alternatives that you have out there. And the reason is they provide a really good advanced service. Public cloud providers should be given their due. However, the cost of those services is out of reach for many of the enterprises out there. And they also don't need 10,000 services. They need a couple of services to support their AI workloads. They find it's easy to move data around these various platforms fairly easy than it was 10 years ago, where that wasn't the case 10 years ago. So now you're facing alternatives that are just way cheaper. And unless they turn around and either lower their prices or change their infrastructure, I don't think it's going to change.
One more thing before we leave that topic. I find that really fascinating. Something like CoreWeave or Snowflake. Of course, they're different. They're offering different business models, and of course, the big platforms. But they're able to do it so much cheaper because they don't have to maintain the rest of the infrastructure, or they're just really more focused on one micro niche. I mean, what is the secret to the second tier players' cheapness in this question?
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head with the micro niche. In other words, CoreWeave decided all we're going to do is be GPUs as a service, and we're going to do AI really well, and we're going to optimize our platform to leverage AI. We're not trying to be the place where you store and run your inventory control applications or ERP systems or everything that's out there in the world of public cloud providers. We just do AI, and our system is optimized for that. Therefore, you're going to get the best price performance more so than the public cloud providers, where they're not optimized for anything. They're optimized for, 300 different patterns of workloads. And so it's the micro niche that people are considering. The fact of the matter is, it's just as easy for me to deploy an AI system on CoreWeave or any other of the micro clouds out there. There's a few of them starting to start up versus AWS, Microsoft, or Google. And therefore, if the price point is lower and they're able to provide more optimized infrastructure to support my AI system, why not? And I think people are asking that question.
Mhm. All right, so since it's the year 2025, I think we need to talk about agentic AI. It feels like it is the mega trend of this year in terms of the AI sector, certainly one of them. So, what do you see as a key concept or roadblock shaping agentic AI this year? And I've got one idea myself, if I may, and that's the idea of the small language models, which seems like the small language models keep going are on the rise. I mean, in a sense, DeepSeek proved that a smaller model can be a cheaper, more effective model. And I think agentic AI might be partially driven by some of these smaller language models. But what's your take in terms of agentic AI in the year 2025?
Yeah, I was early money on agentic AI, at least the resurgence of it. It's actually a concept that's been around for a long time. I put out a couple of courses on LinkedIn Learning last year on agentic AI and how to get into the architecture stuff, and I teach it in my generative AI architecture course.
Hmm.
The reality is that most enterprises are not going to build an LLM. In other words,
Right,
they don't need to
right.
build DeepSeek for their enterprises. It's going to be tactical use cases in terms of small language models that are leveraging their data. These things are going to take a couple of $100 and a couple of 100 GB of data to train it up and get it running, but they're going to carry out very focused tactical use cases. So if the small language models are going to be the preferred platform in making it happen, then also agentic comes into play as a way to deploy those systems. In other words, agentic AI is just autonomous systems able to run any number of places, and they're able to work together around some sort of a consistent goal. They have a persona that's part of the AI system, have a persona that's part of the system altogether. Well, that fits in well with the problems that the businesses are looking to solve: the inventory replenishment problems, the ability to have logistic management problems, where you would have agents running in a number of places on the trucks and the warehouses and the factories, things like that, that are coordinating one to another, that are able to use a tactically focused brain to carry out a particular activity really, really well. And by the way, we're able to build these things in 6 months for less than a couple of $1 million. And so businesses are all over this. Is the trend right now. So they see this as an affordable use case, affordable architecture for where they're looking to take their business. And so that's why agentic just kind of took off like a rocket.
Hmm. I think on the idea of the small language model, I think it's going to keep on evolving. Crazy theory I have. Tell me how crazy this is. That we're each going to have our own personal small language model that we can either quote unquote train or develop, and it's going to help us run our lives. It'll be small enough to run on our phones, obviously. You heard it here first, Dave. What do you think?
No, I think you're right on. In fact, I built one of those things for myself. You can actually run DeepSeek on your own computer. with a commercial grade computer, not the huge parameter model, but enough to be powerful enough. And I trained the model using every article, my books that I wrote, things like that, and was able to adapt to the way in which I analyze information. So I can ask it questions and it's going to answer like myself. And so that's really it's a very primitive version of the small language models that will end up adopting behavior and knowledge and things like that. So we're going to be able to, using Agentic or some other mechanism, allow that thing to carry out processes on our behalf, representing our behaviors and representing our beliefs. It's not going to give money, to an organization you don't believe in. It's not, it's going to pay a bill. It's going to look out for scams and things like that. It's going to carry the knowledge of you and being able to deploy it, and normally with also the back end knowledge of a large language model. So in other words, I not only know what I know because I taught the generative AI system to understand it. In this case, DeepSeek, but it could be anything.
Mhm.
Ultimately, you have the ability to leverage also the whole of the internet in terms of coming up with the answers. So you become very smart in the context of your own beliefs and your own personality. And so you're able to do things that you normally wouldn't have the capability of doing. So I think it's a win-win. And we're all carrying agents on our phones now with, Apple Intelligence and things like that. I think as people get smarter with how this technology works, we are going to see these personalized small language models coming forward. So you're spot on.
Mhm. One last note about the agentic AI. Almost an existential question. Do you think that the rise of agentic AI is going to be the beginning of major job losses for knowledge workers?
I I always a little skeptical about when people say that there's going to be displacement. I think there's going to be change, and I think people are going to adapt and adopt to different tools and technology. We may see a shift in people moving from one career path to another career path, but I think in a whole, it's going to be a positive trend for information workers because they're going to be able to do things in a much faster, much better way. You got to remember, it's not the fact that we're running out of work. We have plenty of work to do it. We just don't have enough people to do it. And so if we're able to automate them and use agentic AI or AI as a force multiplier, I think that's going to bring value to them. So I'm not as scared of it as other people are. There is going to be some changes, very much like the Industrial Revolution in the mid 1800s. We moved from farm-based economy where everything was manual into something that was automated. We adapt to it, we work it, we make it better, we leverage that technology to take us to the next level. So I think I'm a little bit more positive in terms of its impact on the market and the employers, and I'm sorry, the employees.
Yeah, I like the optimism. Absolutely, I want to believe that's true. All right, last question. In your Substack last summer, you wrote that generative AI needs to prove itself. Do you still believe this 6 months later? And I ask because, the cost of training and testing certainly makes generative AI a tough issue for some companies, but a lot of companies aren't actually building models. They're accessing generative AI using an API, so they don't have model training costs. They just have usage costs. So generative AI can be fairly, cost effective given how productive it is. Agree, disagree?
No, I agree, and it's basically almost free. You can use generative AI systems or the APIs for free or a couple of pennies every time a couple of pennies a month, whatever you want to pay for it.
Hmm.
And most of the models out there are open source stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, you can run them on your computer. So we've kind of reached the saturation point where everybody knows how to build it. The issue with generative AI is going to be a couple of things. Number one, we've run out of past of historic data to train the thing with. We're generating data all the time on the open internet, but we're not going back 40, 50 years and training the AI systems on everything that's out there. So it's going to have a limited amount of value and a diminishing amount of value moving forward. There was an MIT Nobel Prize winner who said some great things. He says, generative AI will improve over the next 10 years, perhaps 1.05%. And they're right, because it's based on
That's
data.
small, you mean? Literally.
Yeah, and hugely small increments into it. And that's because it's running out of data. And so there's not much difference between, I don't know why we need 36 LLMs out there. And I get a news release every week, and these things cost $150 million to build and run the
Right.
power of a small city. But they're going to have a diminishing value. And I think that people need to understand how it's going to be used in the context of a business problem. One of the things that enterprises are doing right now, they're running around in a circle. Well, we have generative AI, what do we do? We know it's going to be a game changer for the business, but what business problems do we apply it on?
Hmm.
It hasn't proven itself in that context yet. And so they're falling back, and I think for good reason, onto small language models and agentic based deployments. So then they can take or leave generative AI. That's part of it. So generative AI as a usage model is a huge step forward in terms of where things are going to go. However, our ability to find business value out of that, I think, is going to be a struggle for at least the next several years. So it hasn't proven itself yet.
Well, I guess I'm thinking about knowledge workers, really creative knowledge workers like graphic artists, videographers, even writers. Certainly, those folks are churning out copy and content using generative AI models.
Yeah, yeah, they are. And I mean, I use it, to write a script for my YouTube channel and things like that. And it's a great thing to do. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have value. I just think that we haven't found the value that everybody is predicting that it's going to have. And so it has tactical value for me because I can use it for research. I can use it to help me write a script for my YouTube channel, all the things that generative AI is able to do.
Hmm.
But it's not to the point where it's so game changing that it's going to erase everything out there. In fact, it's people are getting AI fatigue right now. They're getting a little annoyed with the AI generated videos and the AI generated images out there, and also and every I think every paper I got from my students over the last few years has some AI generated content in it.
Right.
So we don't necessarily know where to find the value. We know it's good. We know it's game changing, but it's not changing our game. So what do we do? I think we need to find better use cases for it, better tool sets. We need to use it in some sort of a cascading model, and eventually it's going to reach, a different perspective. We get to the real AI stuff where it's going to be able to have a creative thought. They can't do that now. That's going to be the game changer, and we're not there yet.
Hmm. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Dave, thanks so much for coming on today, and I hope you come back and talk with us again sometime.
I enjoyed myself. Thank you very much.